Sorry, but this section is for invited VIPs only. The words rang out like a quiet verdict. Two suited security guards stood rigidly in front of her, arms folded, faces firm with authority. Their voices weren't loud, but their message carried weight. Heads turned, the crowd murmured, eyes skimming over her plain military-style khaki jacket, the faded patches at the shoulders, and the regulation boots. It wasn't a dress. It wasn't silk. And it certainly wasn't what the other mothers were wearing at this prestigious high school's graduation ceremony. June Maddox didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't protest. She merely looked toward the stage, eyes sweeping over the rows of seats, scanning for her son. Ethan, 17, tall, mixed race, and brilliant. His name was carved into the program as valedictorian. He had earned this, and she had earned the right to witness it. But as the guards gestured again, a polite suggestion masking a deeper intention, June slowly stood. Not because she accepted their judgment, but because she understood how this place worked. Not her place. Not her people. Not her rules. If you've ever been turned away, not for what you've done, but for who you are or who they believe you to be, then you know this moment. You've lived it. And if not, stay. Because in about 10 minutes, this very stage, this very crowd, and these very guards will be standing in stunned silence. It wouldn't be June who needed saving. But someone would definitely need rescuing. The folding chair had her name taped neatly across the back, MDDOX. She arrived early, quietly slipping past the murmuring crowd that had already begun clustering around the campus's front lawn. The chairs were arranged in perfect rows beneath a white canopy, the kind rented for dignified events and donor galas. June took her seat in the fourth row, just behind the main row where school board members and sponsors sat. She nodded politely to the usher, folded her hands over her lap, and breathed in slowly. She wore a faded khaki jacket, standard issue years old, with one barely visible name patch reading, Maddox, above the left pocket. Her boots were shined but worn at the soles. Her hair was pinned back tightly, exposing the sharp lines of a face that spoke not of privilege, but persistence. It didn't take long, less than 10 minutes after she had settled in, when Mrs. Bellamy arrived. Draped in a coral designer wrap, oversized sunglasses perched on top, her perfect blonde waves bouncing with each step. She walked as though the ground had been prepared just for her heels. Her husband followed 2 paces behind, carrying her seat cushion and monogrammed fan. She caught sight of June and sniffed once, as though someone had forgotten to remove an unpleasant centerpiece. Leaning toward another mother in a flowing floral maxi dress, she whispered just loudly enough for 3 rows to hear, "I thought we were keeping the photo section clear of clutter." The chain reaction was subtle but swift. Principal Kent, positioned near the podium, received a note from a staff member. It was short, scribbled in haste. He frowned slightly, scanned the room, then nodded. Security was dispatched within 5 minutes. They did not rush. They did not cause a scene. That was the skill of men trained in optics. Quiet intervention masked as courtesy. "Ma'am," the first guard said with a practice-neutral tone, "would you mind stepping aside? We may need to make space for some last-minute arrangements." June looked up calmly. "This is my seat," she said, her voice soft but firm. "My son is the valedictorian." "Yes, ma'am," the second guard nodded. "It's just a temporary adjustment. We'll be sure you still have a great view." June's fingers tightened slightly on the folded program in her lap. She rose without protest because she knew the game. This town had taught her the rules long ago. She didn't raise her voice or demand validation. She simply gathered her things and followed them. Heels clicking against the walkway, they didn't lead her far, just 1 row back. But then a mother from the fundraising committee needed a place near the front. And then another parent. So, inch by inch, June was moved further from the stage until she was seated in the 10th row, just beneath a sagging banner that read, "Congratulations, Class of 2024. No one sat beside her. No one offered small talk. The air carried the scent of fresh mulch and expensive perfume, neither of which belonged to her. Around her, people chatted about summer homes and alumni donations. But June's eyes were fixed forward, locked on the stage. She did not blink as names were called and students began lining up in alphabetical order. She only adjusted her collar slightly when the wind picked up, revealing more of her name patch. From her seat, June could see Ethan standing near the edge of the platform, straight-backed, composed. His dark curls brushed back, his face bearing the calm expression she had taught him. Never show them they've hurt you. His robe was pressed. His shoes were clean. He belonged up there. He had earned it. Through late-night studies at the diner counter, through early morning rides in a borrowed pickup, through rejection letters she taught him to laugh at. He didn't know she'd been moved, not yet. And June wanted to keep it that way. Let him think she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Mrs. Bellamy had taken her seat now, June's original spot. She fluffed her wrap and opened a compact mirror. An usher brought her a bottle of chilled water. A photographer took a candid shot. June caught the flash from where she sat and turned away. She wasn't angry. She wasn't surprised. She was tired, but steady. Far behind the seats, beyond the canopies, the VIP tables and the donation booths, 6 men stood near the school's perimeter. They didn't move. They didn't speak. But they saw everything. One leaned in slightly, murmured to another, who gave a small nod. They were dressed in plain dress shirts, dark slacks, and polished shoes. Their posture, however, betrayed their training, rigid spines, broad shoulders, eyes that flicked across exits and obstacles like second nature. They stood not for the school, but for a promise. A debt owed. They had not told June they would come. They hadn't needed to. But each had received the same message months before. Ethan Maddox, June's boy. Graduation. As the principal stepped to the microphone and the crowd shifted to attention, June settled back into her seat. She did not fidget. She did not glance behind her. She sat still, quiet, invisible, but immovable. Because while they had taken her chair, they could not take her place. She was here. And that would be enough. June had met Marco at a moment when life still felt like it could go in any direction. He worked with machines, grease under his nails, a wrench in one hand, and a beat-up thermos of strong black coffee in the other. His laugh was too loud for quiet rooms, and he danced in kitchens without music. Marco was born just a few blocks from where June had grown up, but that didn't matter in this town. He was the son of a welder and a waitress, second-generation Latino, and no matter how clean his uniform or how steady his paycheck, he wasn't the kind of man girls like June were supposed to bring home. She was 21 then, still figuring out whether to finish her associate's degree or move out of her parents' house. She met him the day her car stalled outside Bailey's Auto and Tire. He fixed it in 15 minutes, refused her tip, and handed her a business card scribbled with his cell number. "In case it acts up again," he said. "It did," she called. And so it began, a spark forged not in fairy tales, but under a hydraulic lift in the scent of diesel. Their first date was barbecue and a game of pool at Manny's. Their second was at the city library, where June watched him quietly help a child find a picture book in Spanish. She had known then how dangerous kindness could look to some people, but she would learn. She brought him home to meet her family on a Sunday, just as the roast came out of the oven. Her father stiffened at the door, his eyes darkening at Marco's brown skin and firm handshake. Her mother smiled too much, said too little, and wouldn't make eye contact through dinner. By dessert, the silence was louder than words. They didn't say it out loud, not that day, not the next, but it hung between them the same way the stairs did when they walked down Main Street holding hands. The comments came later. "You sure he's not just using you to get out of the garage? His kind don't usually stick around." That last one stuck. When they got married at the courthouse 6 months later, no one from her side attended. They signed the license and drove straight back to their double-wide trailer, where Marco had stocked the fridge with champagne and leftover carne asada. June laughed through tears that night. She'd chosen her life, and she'd chosen well. But she also chose isolation. They built a home out of weekends and quiet mornings. Marco worked extra shifts. June cleaned houses during the day and studied for her GED at night. When Ethan was born, they had $37 in their savings account and a freezer full of frozen waffles. But their son was healthy, with a full head of black hair and his father's wide, wondering eyes. June fell in love all over again, with her child, with her husband, with the life they were carving out inch by inch. But good things rarely lasted in their full bloom. Marco's accident happened on a Tuesday morning. The lift cable snapped, a worn link that should have been replaced months ago. June got the call while she was changing Ethan's bedsheets. By the time she reached the hospital, it was over. Marco was gone, crushed beneath a car he had climbed under to help a young trainee who hadn't shown up for his shift. The garage denied wrongdoing. The safety reports were vague. June hired a lawyer. The case was quietly dismissed. Insufficient evidence, they said. There was no funeral crowd, no casseroles, no flowers. Some of the neighbors watched through their curtains as she carried Ethan down the porch steps that week, but no one came to the door. One woman from the post office mailed her a sympathy card with no return address. Another left an anonymous envelope with two $20 bills inside. But mostly there was silence. The kind of silence that made you wonder if you'd ever been heard in the first place. She tried to move into a better school district, waitlists. She applied for small business loans to fix cars from home, denied. She looked for grief groups, spots were limited. When she enrolled Ethan in the local elementary school, she was told very politely that he would be placed in a class with more accommodating peers. He was 5 years old. He came home his first week asking why the other kids said he looked like someone from TV. June didn't explain. She just held him tighter in the evenings. After Ethan went to bed, June studied, not just for herself anymore, but for him. She learned to repair lawnmowers, change brake pads, replace HVAC systems. She started taking night jobs, first at gas stations, then at local shops. She kept her head down, never gave people a reason to doubt her, never gave them the chance to pity her either. But she never forgot. Not the way they looked at Marco, not the way they erased him, not the way they treated Ethan like a deviation instead of a boy. It burned slow, quiet, but it never went out. And in that slow burn, she forged something steel strong. Because the town had taken Marco, had tried to take her son's seat at the table before he even sat down. But June wasn't just here to witness Ethan's graduation. She was here to prove that nothing, no whisper, no stare, no reassigned seat, could stop what she had built. She had earned her place, and she would hold it. Years passed, and June built a reputation, not just as a capable mechanic, but as someone who could see patterns others missed. Her garage became a hub for the overlooked and the underpaid. She charged fair prices. She listened more than she talked. And when a man from the local VA clinic rolled in with a blown radiator and a flyer for a civil defense training program on his dashboard, he left with a fixed car and her name added to the next recruitment list. The program was funded quietly, run through a collaboration between state emergency response services and military veterans. It was meant to prepare civilians to assist in national crises, floods, riots, blackouts, urban chaos. June applied assuming they wouldn't take her. She wasn't a veteran. She wasn't connected. But she had something more dangerous than credentials. She had clarity. They called her 2 weeks later. She arrived at the training compound just outside Fort Logan wearing her work boots and a patched jacket. Most of the other recruits were former firefighters, paramedics, or military retirees. She stuck out immediately, short, female, pale, and quiet. But she carried herself like a weight she couldn't drop. And she never complained. On the third day of orientation, they introduced the embedded SEAL trainees, 6 men, all under 30, assigned to the compound for a 2-month urban recon rotation. The idea was cross-training military meets civilian logic. Most civilians were starstruck. Not June. She nodded once and returned to her map table. They noticed her during the second week, during a simulation of an urban hostage rescue scenario. June rerouted 2 units through a side alley that wasn't even on the compound's original grid. Old building schematics, she said simply when asked how she knew. Most cities don't update them fast enough. The SEAL commanding officer raised an eyebrow. One of the recruits muttered, "Who is this chick?" He found out 30 minutes later when she spotted an ambush in the northwest quadrant before the drone feed even caught it. By the end of the third week, they had a nickname for her, Guide. Not as a joke. As a title. She taught them how to read wind shifts by leaves on the sidewalk, how to predict choke points and alley layouts, how to spot weaknesses in two perfect plans. They taught her too, in their own way, how to see movement patterns, how to clear a stairwell without getting killed. But she never pretended to be one of them. She didn't need to. Then came the heat stroke incident. The drill was simple: simulate a rolling blackout in a mock city grid, navigate checkpoints, extract civilians. One of the younger SEALs, Deacon, collapsed just behind a loading dock. No one saw him fall except June. She ran back alone, dragged him across the asphalt, tore off his vest, and began pouring water from her own canteen across his face and neck while shouting for medical. The instructors clocked her time. She had reached him 23 seconds before the nearest assigned medic. After that, the way they stood around her changed. No more side comments. No more half-glances. They took notes when she spoke. One of them, a wiry sniper named Hartley, started showing her old satellite recon maps during lunch. "What would you do here?" he asked over and over. She told him every time. He nodded every time. He learned something. The last day of the program came too fast. No ceremony, no plaques, just a handshake and a certificate in a brown envelope. But that night, as she packed her truck, the 6 men approached her silently. Each handed her a patch, dark green canvas, marked with a number, 6, below it. One word embroidered in dull thread: Guide. They didn't say goodbye. They just nodded and walked away. The next week, they were deployed. June never talked about it, not to Ethan, not to anyone. It wasn't a story to brag about. It was a moment that had happened and passed. But she kept that patch folded inside her glove box for years. It reminded her that even if the world only ever saw a small woman in dusty boots, somewhere out there were 6 men who remembered the difference she made. And on the morning of Ethan's graduation, when she pulled that jacket off its hanger, she paused for a moment, opened the glove box, took the patch, and sewed it quietly, carefully, onto the inside lining, just over her heart. June had made it through the gates. She had her pass and had arrived early, wearing her old uniform jacket, the same one that had seen more dust and disaster zones than the polished boots lining the stage. She found her seat in the 4th row. Her name neatly printed on a placard: June Maddox, parent of valedictorian. She sat with both feet planted squarely, her hands folded over the program in her lap, and her back straight, despite the heat beginning to settle into the open-air venue. Her eyes scanned the stage once, memorizing the path her son would walk, and then settled in. The first 30 minutes passed quietly. The parents began filling in, murmurs of excitement, the occasional laugh, a few harried staff members darting between sections with clipboards. Then came the entourage, Mrs. Bellamy and her court of perfectly coiffed socialites. She walked like she was stepping onto a runway, her coral silk shawl fluttering dramatically, designer heels clicking across the pavement. Her teenage daughter trailed behind her, pouting in place, irritated with the brightness or the attention, likely both. When Bellamy reached the front rows, her eyes immediately caught June's khaki silhouette among the pastels and pearls. She paused, adjusted her sunglasses, and tilted her head. Then she leaned in to whisper something to the woman next to her, who responded with a polite gasp and an arched eyebrow. June noticed. Of course she noticed. She had learned long ago how to read conversations without hearing the words. And this one was clear. What is she doing here? It was always that question, not who is she, not what has she done, but why is she not in her place? A few moments later, a neatly dressed usher appeared at her elbow. "Ma'am, I'm terribly sorry, but we've had a last-minute change in seating arrangements. We're asking a few parents to relocate to the overflow section, just for capacity reasons." He smiled apologetically, eyes flicking to Bellamy behind him. "We'll make sure you have a good view." June stared at him for a moment. Her hands didn't move. Her jaw stayed relaxed. "This seat has my name on it," she said simply. "I understand," the usher said, his voice still courteous but firmer. "We've been advised by administration." There it was, the unspoken hand of the principal. the hierarchy of appearance cloaked in logistics. June stood. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She simply gathered her things, just a folded program in her pride, and moved. They led her back one row. Then two. Another parent arrived with an embellished lanyard and a glossy invitation. June was moved again. It kept happening, quietly, efficiently, until she found herself in the 10th row, just under the canopy's edge. Sunlight bled onto her knees, and the breeze stirred loose dirt along the floor. From her new seat, she could still see the stage, still see the podium where her son would speak. But the gap between them had grown, not in feet, but in principle. Behind her, conversations flowed, vacation plans, college gossip, a woman with a sharp laugh discussing her upcoming real estate deal. No one acknowledged June. No one offered a smile or a word of solidarity. She may as well have been a statue. But June didn't fidget. She didn't look back. She simply stared ahead, watching as the faculty filtered in and began organizing the rows of graduates behind the stage. Her eyes found Ethan quickly. He looked steady, serious. His robe was ironed, tassel fixed neatly. He scanned the crowd briefly, and she held her breath, willing him not to notice she'd been moved. If he saw her pushed to the back, it would hurt. And she didn't want him to carry that today. Meanwhile, no one noticed the 6 men who had been standing at the edge of the field since the crowd first gathered. They blended in, not just because of the way they dressed, but because of the way they held themselves, purposefully, quietly, like men who knew how to wait. They didn't carry signs, didn't wear uniforms, but something about the way they moved, their alert posture, the way they scanned the perimeter, marked them as different. They had shown up without announcement, without fanfare. No one had invited them. No one needed to. They were already watching when June was escorted back. They saw each shift in her position, each polite smile that pushed her further into obscurity. They said nothing. But each time she was moved, their stance grew stiller, tighter. One of them, a tall man with a sharp jaw and graying temples, finally murmured to another, "She hasn't said a word." The other man nodded. She wouldn't. Back in her seat, June let out a quiet breath. Her hands rested on her lap, one thumb gently stroking the edge of the embroidered patch sewn just beneath her jacket's inside lining. She didn't need to touch it to remember it was there. But she did anyway. She hadn't seen the 6 men in years, hadn't spoken to them since the training compound. But that had never mattered. Bonds forged in heat didn't require reminders. They required readiness. And somewhere deep in her bones, she knew, they were already here.